Our name for this series, Gateway Out of the Holocaust, may not be totally accurate, at least for some. In fact, at least for most. God has said a number of things in the 17th and 18th chapter of Isaiah that should captivate our attention at this time. He told us that there would be a terrorist uprising out of Damascus that would topple the Assyrian government, and that terrorists amassing all around Syria and the Muslim countries surrounding it would rise up against Israel, resulting in a twisted heap of ruins. And because of these terrorists, who God says will stop on occasion to prostrate themselves in prayer, there will be a state of terror that is carved out of Israel. Yahowah is explicit and says that prior to the Shabat harvest, 7 years prior to David's return as king and Messiah, and 2033 or 6,000 that this state of terror that will be carved out of the heart of Israel will narrow Israel at the waist so that the country becomes indefensible. And this then leads to some both pleasant and horrific developments. The Shabuah harvest, the Towrah harvest, the sacrifice of the red heifer, the protection of the final remnant of Israel, all wonderful examples of what God will be doing amongst his people. But Yahowah holds a grudge. If you do something that is harmful to his people in a significant way, he will not only condemn you, but he will make certain that his people are aware in advance of what you're going to do, so that they can protect themselves from you. And he uses some 72 adjectives to describe not only the United States of America, but the arrogance, belligerence, vindictiveness of Donald Trump. This is frustrating for me because politically I'm too conservative to be a Republican. So I don't much like it when I have to assail the president from a party that would be the more conservative of the two choices in American politics. But nonetheless, the obvious is undeniable in this case. Not only have the prophets spoken, and this is going to happen in the next year where Israel is betrayed, and therefore it is the Trump administration, because it is America that is described, as is Donald Trump, in Isaiah 18. And that I have already done a series of programs on the 20 some odd evidences that I can use to prove that Donald Trump has already made this decision to betray Israel, and it's just part of his overall plan. And of course, what we're witnessing today and yesterday, I was probably the first to report on the breakdown, doing a video blog yesterday on the meltdown of Donald Trump towards Elon Musk. And today it's just gotten so much worse, with MAGAs all doing as one would forecast. They're rallying around Trump and demeaning the man that had the greatest influence of any person in history in terms of a U.S. national election. No one has ever donated as much as did Elon Musk in the last presidential election. It was sufficient in the swing states for Trump to prevail over Cackles, who at that time was gaining considerable momentum, Trump having lost his debate with her. So to see a president of the United States in the Oval Office just deliberately lie, saying that Elon Musk had worn thin, which is the opposite of what he had said the prior week, to say that he had decided to move Trump Musk out of the administration, which again was the opposite of what he said the other week. So he was either lying then or yesterday or both days, just because he's so vindictive. And then he said that the whole issue with Elon trying to besmirch his character had nothing to do with the fact that the President Trump's big, beautiful bill, according to the unaffiliated Congressional Budgetary Office, will add nearly $4 trillion to the debt of America. He said that the only reason that Elon was against it was because it eliminated the electric vehicle credits. It's not even true. It doesn't eliminate the electric vehicle credits. And if it was going to save the country money and be beneficial for the United States, Elon would have been the first to say, right thing to do. Trump just flat out lied to besmirch Elon Musk's character, as he does so many, as he has in the past, as he will in the future. He is who he is, and he is a mean-spirited tyrant and exceedingly vindictive. Has no regard whatsoever for the truth. He will take the man most responsible for keeping him out of prison, taking him from prison to the White House. Yes, he would have been in prison had he not won that election, because he was continuing to be found guilty in one felony trial after another, and jail time was in the offing. And the way he pays Elon Musk back is to besmirch him. Then he threatens him and says, I'm going to pull all of the government programs to Musk companies. And then he says that Musk is sick. He's got a problem. It's just revolting. And no one should say that about anyone. But if you're the president of the United States and you're only president because of what this man did for you, and you're so self-centered, so vindictive that you would besmirch him over that, or if you're one of the Trumpites and you haven't a half a brain, and you as a MAGA are now saying, oh yeah, Trump, he's right. Don't go against Trump, man. He's our guy. The whole meltdown is Elon Musk's fault. What are you, oblivious? Can't you read? You're blind? Or are you just so political that truth no longer matters? Right no longer matters. All that matters is that Trump is your Messiah. It's repulsive. And it's particularly repulsive because I know from these prophecies that it is Trump that is going to betray Israel. It's a certainty. It's going to happen within the next year, within this year, within the next 12 months. And the saddest thing about this is that there are voices on X, for example, that care deeply about Israel. And one of my favorites today was talking about how good Donald Trump is for Israel and for the United States. And she just really hopes that he and Elon can just figure out how to get along. Just go, how are you going to help Israel if you're fanning the flames of a fire designed to burn down Israel? Because you can't let go of your right-wing politics. You know, one of the things I learned really early on, I may have come into this as a person who had formerly been a Republican, but I had had exposure to the highest ranking Republicans. Man, I met most of them. I had many of them in my home. I got to know them really well. I went to their homes. And what I learned is they were all scum. It is the arena of egos. They're not very bright, and none of them are moral. And so I walked away. I said, I don't want anything to do with politics anymore. I became apolitical, which is why YAHOWAH found me useful. But if you can't get over your politics, if you can't get over your religion, then you can't be part of the solution. You are part of the problem. And if you want to continue to be political, you want to continue to be religious, because, well, being political and religious makes you popular. You can have a huge audience on X If you are touting one of the three prominent religions, or if you go full MAGA crazy or full Marxist nutsoid, even conspiratorial, you name it, you identify with one of the crazies or multiple of the crazies, you can be real popular. But you're going to find out that rather than helping Israel, you have not only destroyed your own soul and those of your children and your loved ones, but you squandered your country's very existence. Yahweh says of these people, they shall be continually abandoned and forever forsaken. You continue to be political and religious, you will be continually abandoned and forever forsaken. There is no hope for you. It is azab. Azab is the worst word in the Hebrew lexicon. It means damned. It means rejected. It means estranged, neglected. It was scribed in the niphal stem, where the subject is the one being neglected, and in the imperfect, which reveals that the fate will be ongoing and continual. All together, completely, all at once, as if they were all alike. All of the religious, all of the political, you will be continually abandoned and forsaken. My job here is to convince you to stop being religious and political until you can become like Abraham. What was it about Abraham that caused him to be the one person on the planet that Yahweh reached out to? Can you figure it out? He walked out of Babylon. He left Babylon. God's calling you out of Babylon. If you can't leave Babylon, which means to confuse and confound by intermixing truth and lies, religion and politics, if you can't walk out of Babylon, then you don't qualify. What was it about Moshe? Why was this one man, a stutterer, an old broken down shepherd? What was it about Moshe that made him the only person qualified to act along with Yahweh in 1447 BCE? You can figure this out, can't you? He walked away from Mitzrayim. He left that political and that religious milieu behind. He was disgusted by it. He disassociated from religion and politics, from the caste economic system. That's what made him usable. When Yahweh came to me and asked me to do this job, I may not have had any credentials, at least from a human perspective. God saw a promise in me, but the one thing I did have is I was just like Moshe. I was just like Abraham. I had walked away from religion and politics. I had once been up to here in both of them, and I became so disgusted by both of them, I thought my way out of them, and so can you. But if you don't, then you're going to be continually abandoned and forever forsaken. Now, my job is not to save all of Israel. It just isn't. Listen, 2/3 of you are going to die over the next 8 years. We're entering the time of Israel's troubles. It starts in 12 months. It's already bad, and it's going to get really, really bad. My job isn't to save you from that, although I'm offering you the salvation from it because I am hosting the Shabuah harvest. 12 months. I'm taking the entire covenant family with me to Shamayim. You're welcome to join us, but there are some rules of the road. And the first rule of that road is that you have to stop being religious. You have to walk away from Babylon. You have to walk to Yahweh and allow him to perfect you, which means that you need to accept the terms and conditions of the covenant and celebrate the Moed Mikra, particularly Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim, as they were fulfilled by Dod, the actual Messiah and Son of God. That's a lot for you to process if you're religious. But that's the offer. Otherwise, you're going to be forsaken forever. Forever estranged from God. All together, completely, all at once, as if all of the religious and all of the political were alike. the approaching birds of prey, the screaming and squeaking, flying creatures which hunt for living victims to kill and then prey upon the dead, swooping in, darting about, vicious and violent, voracious and deadly, from high places, from above. Now they represent the beasts of the earth. Who are the most beastly on the earth now? Well, if you were the Houthis, you would say the United States. They flew in on all of their raptors and hawks and all number of warbirds. If you're a Jew, you're going to say the Muslims. You'd say Hamas, not knowing that Hamas is just Islam, but it's Muslims. You know, if you're the Russians, it's the Ukrainians and the EU and the United States that provide their weapons. If it's Ukrainians, it's Russians. World's full of viciousness. God's only speaking, though, to his people. So these beasts, they're the monsters that perpetrated October 7th. In the whole of the Hebrew lexicon, there is no more damning word than azab. Rejected, estranged, damned. It is especially true when scribed in the Niphal imperfect, because such individuals are actually forsaken in such a way that they will find themselves literally disassociated from the covenant and eternally separated from God, which is to be neglected by him. This damning experience occurs in Sheol, which is what is being presented in the words which follow. Now, an interesting aspect of azab is that it is a double entendre. It conveys the idea of being set free and being released. Oh, that sounds wonderful, up to the point you realize that souls are being set free from Yahowah. They're being released from the covenant. The word confirms that those who choose not to accept God's terms, those who reject him, those who won't even say his name, those who reject the notion that David fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim, and there was no Jesus, they're going to get their wish. They're going to get exactly what they want. They're set free of all obligations, all of the terms and conditions and the benefits of the covenant and of the Mikra. And they will spend an eternity in the most depressing and lightless of places. But at least there won't be any fire. By way of affirmation, we're told that by this time, every estranged soul will be yakdah, deemed alike, and treated as if they're one and the same, united and in one accord. It will not matter if they worship Allah or Jesus, if they're Mormons or Scientologists, Hindus or Buddhists, socialists, secular humanists, or believe nothing at all. Time has run out. And since there's only covenant members who are welcome into Yahowah's place, back into the garden, all others must be sent away and either incarcerated or annihilated, and it no longer matters what ism they follow. Now, one caveat on that. God doesn't very often warn those apart from Israel unless they're harming Israel. And these are belligerents, and so they could be those that are harming Israel, but those, God speaks to his people and those harming his people, all right? So those who are there belligerent and harming his people, it's off to Sheol. Cause and consequence. You came to kill God's people. God says, I don't like that, and I'm sending you off to hell. That's the consequence. To the Yehudim and Israelites that are there who remain alike in their religiosity and their politics and their militism and whatever it may be that estranges them from God, well, they will be cast in with that same lot, and they're going to be sent off to Sheol at this time because you were counter to God at a time when it was essential to awaken God's people and to bring them into this final time of reconciliation, of the homecoming of Yahweh and Dod. This is not a time to be religious or political. If you're either one, you're viewed as an obstacle which must be discarded. Now, this does not speak, though, of another group of people. And that's the point I wanted to make, that there will be Goyim who will make it into the millennial Shabbat. They're not part of Israel. They're not part of the covenant. They're going to be the worker bees of tomorrow. It's a pretty good gig because the conditions are going to be idyllic. And it certainly beats going to Sheol. And it even beats, dying. But the Goyim who haven't come to attack Israel, who aren't anti-Semitic, who aren't overtly religious, who aren't overtly political, who have a positive attitude, and who have some aptitudes, they'll be allowed into the millennial Shabbat. Well, not that there ever had been, but especially now, there is no reason for God to protect anyone that isn't part of his family, especially since they've run out of time to change. No tomorrows left. Therefore, they will be ravaged by the La'ayat, the approaching birds of prey, these screaming and shrieking creatures which hunt living victims to kill their prey, coming in from high above. But it is what follows that should grab your undivided attention. Menacing and deadly as man's machines have become. And this is one of the things that we really saw, and we're seeing, if you pay any attention in social media, one of the things that is becoming alarmingly frightful is these small helicopter type drones. They typically have 4 counter rotating rotors. So it's, about this, in the range of 18 inches, a cubit, if you will, by a cubit, with the 4 little propellers, battery operated, and they carry like C4 explosive. And they were the ones that were used to swarm in and take out what the 12, 15, 18 of the Russian long-range bombers throughout Russia. But they're also used, and you see all sorts of video of them being used to kill individual men. They're sent out, and throughout the fighting in Ukraine, these things find a person, and they just, no matter what that person does, darts, tries to shoot, hides, they just zero into the person. And once they've zeroed in a person, that person will flee for their life for 20, 30 seconds, and kaboom, it's over. And they're easy to build. The technology exists around the world. And I think this is God's way of saying that tactic that was used with such devastating horror now in the Ukraine proxy war against Russia is going to be pervasive. Drones are going to be flying everywhere into Israel. Big ones and little ones. And there will be nowhere to hide. It's going to be hellacious. Menacing and deadly as man's machines have become, they pale in comparison to the Ba'ima Eretz, the beasts of the material realm. The first of these beasts, Babylon, has plagued humankind throughout the millennia. It was here that religion was born, and here that it became government's constant companion. It was here that lies and myths were mingled with truth to befuddle and confuse the preponderance of people. And that is why Babel is destined to die. It is not going down without a fight, however, and it will not be fighting God and his people alone. Babel has evolved over the centuries from Babylon to Persia, from Media, Persia to Greece, from Greece to Imperial Rome, then from Rome to the Roman Catholic Church. But it still lingers on in Iran and Iraq, particularly geographically. In our world, at least geographic Babylon is the Islamic Middle East. Political Babylon is the United States and Europe. Religious Babylon is Roman Catholic Church and Orthodox Christianity. Beginning with the astrological Babylon and evolving into Zoroastrian Persia, this pelagious beast would morph into the Gnostic Greece and of their politics, of their society, of their religions, which devolved into the Byzantine Empire, becoming Orthodox Christianity. The Greek interpretation of Babel was absorbed by the deadliest and most vicious of creatures ever known to man, Imperial Rome, the pelagious monster that would attack and devastate Yehuda with 3 horrific invasions. Pompeii in 66 BC. You know why Pompeii came in 66 BC? Because 2 Jews were bickering among themselves as to which one was going to be king and which one was going to be high priest. And you would think that, well, the gig is king. That would be the real money maker. Nope. It was high priest. And so the king wanted to be high priest. The brother that was the high priest wanted to keep that job. He didn't want to become king. And so they brought in outsiders to fight for themselves because, they were too weak-kneed and spindly arms to actually battle one another. And they brought in proxies to fight for them. And Rome said, no. You're not going to do that. This area we need to come through to manage all of the territories that we have conquered. And you're just not going to do that. And so Pompey came in to squelch the politicized religious malfeasance in Israel, 66 BCE. Then Vespasian and Titus came in 66 CE. That was a lovely experience, wasn't it? They tore down the temple, bludgeoned a lot of Jews, carried many off to Rome. They used the proceeds of Yahowah's temple to fund the construction of the Colosseum. They used the Jewish slaves that they brought out. Can you imagine walking that distance as a slave from Jerusalem all the way to Rome? And then once they got there, they worked them to death building the Colosseum. So the building that was a celebration of God's love turned into the most horrific arena for sadistic death, cultic religions, perverted politics, the Roman Colosseum. This, of course, then was followed by Hadrian in 132 CE. He came in, of course, because Rabbi Akiba foisted a false messiah on his people and on Rome, and that led to the renaming of Judea as Palestina, which is the curse all the way to this time, the full diaspora, ultimately to the Holocaust. Rabbi Akiba was a hell of a guy. And of course, he's the father of Rabbinic Judaism. Now, this monster lives on politically and religiously with national Babel, now represented by the United States, and yet it is the ultimate expression of the beast, which is more haunting still, even more azab than its predecessors. And that horror, which grew out of Imperial Rome, is now the Roman Catholic Church, the epitome of Paul's plague of death. And of course, with all of Yeshaya, Isaiah 18, and the 72 attributes describing the nation that has most responsible for pillaging God's people and betraying Israel. Guess where the Pope hails from now? Ding, ding. United States, the most belligerent man on the planet, and the Pope. Both Americans. Now, if that were not enough, these Yada, Azab, completely forsaken and eternally damned, these estranged and separated souls will be tormented by the most menacing Bahima, beasts, and Ayat, flying creatures who prey upon the dead. Yahowah could also be speaking of Satan and his cadre of demons. He may well be depicting an eternity in Sheol, but also we're nearing the time that the corporeal manifestation of Satan is going to make his appearance. And he's going to have a tremendous influence in Jerusalem, particularly during the last 3.5 years. And so certainly by 2030, but it's very possible that by this time next year, that the world will be exposed to the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan. Those who end up in his company, which will be most Islamic jihadists, most Catholic popes, most world leaders, they're going to find themselves in the realm of questioning, with time being eternal and no other dimensions. They will be, at least among kindred spirits, about depraved ones, the likes of the Donald. Yes, the Donald doesn't have God choosing to save him, to choose him, to anoint him for this time. No, he's going to be the devil's advocate. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, should you be looking for an airborne beast, we have found one with the Nova coronavirus. It flies with every breath, sneeze, cough, spoken word, or ultimate untimely burp. And while it only kills 1 in 500 of those it infects, it was sufficiently fearsome to topple the freedoms and the integrity of the human race. Based upon the implications associated with Yada, everyone will be similarly religious, political, patriotic, and militaristic. The inhabitants will be treated alike, which is to say that there will be no distinction, status, or hierarchy. While those who will be imprisoned in Sheol will have come from high places, they will be brought down to the same level, a distinction that these religious clerics, government leaders, and military officers, as well as fallen messengers, will find particularly horrifying. The experience will be universally nauseating and miserable, with Satan's fallen envoys similarly incarcerated and preying upon the living dead. We humans have been beguiled into believing that our times and our nation are somehow better than others, but in reality, it's very much the same. Humankind has been subjected to and controlled by the cult of man since the very beginning. Men have made gods in their own image as long as there have been men, whether it's the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Romans, all with their statues to gods in the shape of men and women, or you look at the Roman Catholic Church with its statues to Mary and to Jesus as the dead God on a stick. Although you got to get the Roman Catholics credit, it takes some serious chutzpah to picture your God as a tortured God on a stick, or that as a baby in a pagan mommy's arms, reenacting the role of Asherah as the mother of God and the queen of heaven. They have ascribed their feelings and ambitions to these phony gods, using them to manipulate other men. These gods and the men who conceived them have given rise to every civilization. This is true for Babylon and Persia, Greek and Carthage, imperial and Catholic Rome, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and Incas too. Modern man is just a bit more blatant, eliminating the need for pretend gods by elevating men above God, although they still have the man god of Jesus and the rock god of Allah. Every religion and civilization is a cult, acting like a gang, bringing out the worst in human behavior. So certainly a cult of personality with the Donald. Independently, men and women have their propensity for good and bad, but collectively, collectively, man has always been deadly, destructive, deceitful. It was pointed out to me a number of times with regard to the source of COVID-19, even the term communism is completely misappropriate. China has established a free enterprise economy and is 20 years removed from the unproductive and deadly experiment with communism. Therefore, to apply a label to a ruling party describing what they have abandoned is nonsensical. The government of China is nothing more or less than a large cult acting like a petulant gang. To retain power, the cult leaders will lie and cheat, depriving all others of liberty and opportunity. They have become the antithesis of what Yah intended. And they will be abruptly awakened in the summer with vexing and exacerbating action taking against them. Now, in this case, when you look at all of the timelines that Gabriel Dode provided in Daniel, one of the things you come to recognize is that this second version of October 7th, which is an asymmetrical attack on Israel, where Israel's IDF is very adept at tracking tanks and armored personnel carriers and airplanes. They're really lousy at tracking jihadists on foot. And so they not only couldn't deal with and stop the jihadists that migrated into Israel to rape, kill, torture, and abduct Jews, they couldn't even respond 12 hours later. And this next version is going to be 1,000 times worse. And it's going to happen in the summer. I think the timing is in June of 2027. And so it will be abruptly awakened in the summer with a vexing and exasperating action taking against them. They will be roused from the realm of the dead, becoming alert while remaining inactive, alive, consciously grieving, with others loathing them, goading them in extremely hot and vehement manner in an abhorrent place of sickening death and dread. Birds of prey, screaming, shrieking, flying creatures which hunt, kill their prey, and also all of the beasts, the behemoth, the wild and antagonistic creatures of the material realm of the Eretz, will be among and against them during the autumn and the winter, continuing on, ridiculing, taunting them for actually being irrational and consistently confused. Boy, if that describes what we have seen of Muslims, they act like monsters. You can't even call them human. You can't even call them animals. And the way that no animal would do what they did. They're monsters. These are beasts. And they're going to attack in the summer, and they're going to continue on through the autumn and the winter, continually doing what Muslims do best: ridicule and taunt. They are irrational. They are confused. They are beastly. They are deadly. This is Yeshayah. Freedom is from Yahweh. Isaiah 18:6. Kutz was scribed in the called imperfect consecutive, and it reveals that those who have died in open hostility to Yisrael will be abruptly awakened to a totally new and eternal, exasperating reality, as will those that have been attacked. They will wish that they could have remained in an eternal slumber, because the perpetually damned will find themselves loathed by those they served. They will face an eternity of being continually annoyed and aggravated to the point of total frustration. It sounds like the jihadists will have a trip to hell for taunting God's people. Also, telling Kutz reveals that the souls incarcerated in Sheol will be alert and conscious, but inert, inactive, and unable to move. They are living the Christian and Muslim dream termed nightmare, eternal life, but in an abhorrent place of sickening dread. Actually, eternal life among the religious. While there is a hint of hot and quits, it speaks of the time of year when spring turns to summer, which is when this will be occurring. It is also addressing the vehement attitude displayed by demons and the temperature of, not the temperature of the place. And it is in June, just over a year after Israel is dissected and the fake Palestinian state is established, prior to May 22nd of 2026, thus in June of 2027, that this invasion is likely to occur. So this time, in addition to the screaming and shrieking birds of prey, we are told that every beast of the material realm will be part of this great onslaught, which means that the beasts from Babel to the Bible, from the reincarnation of Imperial Rome to Roman Catholicism, will be the multiculturalists of socialist, secular humanism, the Marxists, and the Muslims. They're all going to be on the prowl. Well, that's a bit antiquated. Our reality and the wake of the world's response to COVID-19 is that drones are already on the prowl to usurp liberty and livelihood, ensuring that everyone remains dependent upon and controlled by the gods of government and the high priests of academia and the media. And then you've had the rise of the Marxist Muslim Alliance, which has tried to instill fear into God's people. So they're afraid to even identify as being Jewish. They're afraid to go out in public, all because of this rise of Marxist morons and murderous Muslims. It is an interesting and yet seldom considered aspect of Western civilization today that academia, the media, and the government are all the same, all driven by political correctness and their liberal approach to power and control. Science has been sequestered by it, with no one daring to step outside the bonds of groupthink. No matter how easily disproven are the myths of uncreated life, macroevolution, or of controllable man-made global warming. It is why between scientists, the media, and politicians, dissenting voices regarding the proper response to things like the coronavirus were quickly discredited and silenced. The few scientists and journalists who knew better, who wanted to share their contrarian research, took to social media, where they were summarily demonized and banned. The very thought police would accept evidence or reason as justification. Truth has become man's foe. And I was once banned from YouTube for promoting the universal benefit of vaccines, because you just said vaccine and the thought police wanted to ban you for having the audacity to suggest we ought to think about them as opposed to just follow the government's mandate and be jabbed. Turns out the vaccines were counterproductive and accomplished nothing. The government was wrong. The scientists were wrong, although they don't apologize. They were even wrong when, in early February, March of 2020, I did the research along with my wife, and we determined conclusively and proved with evidence that the coronavirus was created in the Hunan lab, and that lab was partially funded by agencies that were managed by Fauci, and that the Chinese knew and the Americans knew and Fauci knew that that virus was a human concoction. They mixed bats together that had SARS, that had Ebola, that had HIV, and then they manufactured a trigger that such that it attached more effectively to a human host. It was a manufactured virus. It got away, they say, by accident, by a lab accident. But had all the research been given immediately on it, it would have been quite easy to constrain it, but the Chinese didn't, the Americans didn't. And the media, scientific and political community worldwide, the United Nations, all lied. Since Karaf addresses this period of autumn leading to winter, and Coots speaks of spring leading to summer, we know that this torment will be year-round without intermission, but perhaps the most telling indication of it is found in the consecutive mood, which reveals that these living dead will be in this horrible situation because of the choices that they made during their lives. God's hellish depiction of the realm of the forsaken and damned was advanced by Sharaf, conveying that the inmates of Sheol and those tormenting God's people here on earth are going to endure a winter of their discontent. They will Sharaf, taunt, and they will ridicule, and they will be taunted and ridiculed, depending if you're looking at Israelis as the victims or Muslims as the perpetrator. Something that the political and religious elitists find particularly excruciating, scorned and vilified for their pathetic attempts to thwart God's people, place, and purpose. Once proud and powerful individuals will now be mocked and insulted for their confused and irrational rhetoric that they spewed at the unsuspecting. We have entered the dumbest time in world history, where most of those under 30 are so influenced by academic indoctrination that they are actually Marxists, with all evidence showing how bad humanity becomes in large organizations when power is centralized, and how economies do not work and freedoms are devoured in such circumstances. And nonetheless, they are now touting what has been so thoroughly disproven in Marxism. And worse than that, they have partnered with the most fascist, most demeaning to women, most ruthless and archaic religion in human history, Islam. And condemning Jews of colonialization when the most colonial influence in human history is Islam. We've just entered the time of universal stupid. And even if you get away from the Marxists and the Muslims and you turn to MAGAs, as I witness this, what Trump did to Elon Musk and what Trump has done to the world, and MAGAs continuing to support him no matter how many bribes he takes, no matter how many contributors he writes pardons for. They worship the man. Its brains no longer function. But God says, I'm going to hold them accountable for the hundreds of thousands, millions, and billions of lives they have shortchanged. Further scribed in the call imperfect, they are going to have to endure their fate for an eternity because of the irrational decisions that these living zombies have made as they rise to power. While it has grown dramatically weaker, there has been no indication that the subject nation has changed since YAHOWAH described the United States of America in the first two stanzas of this declaration. Therefore, it would be reasonable to assume that America will be brought down while its political and military leadership is given an express ticket to its demise. There is obviously a consequence of arming and abetting Israel's enemies. You should know that apart from boomers, these nuclear submarines, there isn't a ship that floats on the sea that is anything more than a floating coffin. America's battle groups, its aircraft carrier battle groups, if a war begins with that includes the United States, China, and or Russia, The surface ships won't last a week. Um, it's just not going to be feasible, and that means that it'd be exceedingly difficult for most nations even to project their influence apart from intercontinental ballistic missiles and boomers. And if they're going to shoot those and at one another, they are not going to have conventional warheads. So militaries that fight with armies, and boy, look at tanks. I mean, tanks are coffins on tracks. Armored personnel carriers are just deathbeds. Um, we've reached a time where even our attack helicopters and our uh, flying gunships, they kill more of our own than we kill of the enemy. And drones have made going to war and killing remote control. We are really in a terrible, terrible place. At this time, Baha eth ha, he, on this occasion, in the context of these events, at this moment on the calendar, it shall be delivered forcefully in a straightforward manner. Yabal, under the control of another and against its will, it shall be brought directly in a linear fashion, and it shall be carried off and away, bringing him and it as a tribute, as a gift, which is born out of reverence and respect for the relationship of Yahweh. Wow. It's quite a thought, particularly of the vast array of spiritual implements. So here we go from and at this time. And it shall be delivered forcefully and in a straightforward manner. This is Yabel. And in this particular case, it could well be that it's the hopeful stem, which means that the nation is being forcibly controlled by another, literally carried from one place to another against its will, while the imperfect conjugation reveals that there will be ongoing consequences. It's going to be forcefully presented as a tribute, as a gift. It's born out of reverence and respect for the relationship unto Yahweh, the vast array of spiritual messengers. These people are wont to constantly direct others to extend their influence, who have a prolonged desire to take things away, who are actively involved out in front, enticing others at considerable cost, who have a propensity to engage in the world as if it were their own, who are often intoxicated and completely immodest. And it goes on to say, they are scrubbed clean, smooth skinned, shaven, and yet typically reckless with their weapons sharpened and gleaming. They are a people and a nation which is frightening and feared, even dreadful, while at the same time respected for their awesome power. They are from here to there and beyond in a future time. Boy, he's talking about America again. These are the same attributes that were used to describe America. This Gentile nation is comprised of many races and people. It routinely spews out nonsense in a strange and foreign language, talking down to others while continually marching off to war, basing on their condescending and moronic rhetoric. Isaiah's actually met Trump, acting like a great power, all of which deserve to be mocked and ridiculed. Actually, somebody told me that, that Trump is the man for the world and for America at this time. I said, and they're talking about God's using him in this role. And I said, well, actually, God has nothing to do with America. This person claimed, God has always been at America's side, or America's founders was all based upon God and God's direction. And I said, well, actually, the only mention of America and among Yahweh's prophets is in the 18th chapter of Isaiah. And there it follows a woe, and there are 70 some descriptors, all that describe America today and Donald Trump. And the woe is, you're in a whole pile of shit. And this country should be ridiculed and mocked, as it's the case with its leaders, always trying to expand and impose its influence. How many 51st states do we have now? Well, there's Canada, there's Greenland, I think there's Panama. Who knows how? Oh, there was going to be Gaza. Always trying to expand and impose its influence, even its faith, establishing the rules while senselessly drawing lines in the sand, eagerly throwing others out of their land. It aggressively conquers and subdues, trampling other people down, which is antagonistic and destructive, while imposing its will, often partnering with enemies. Boy, that is true with the Trumpster for sure. Polluted, blind, and loathsome, educating the world while stripping it bare, desecrating most everything of value, imposing its will like a child. So, from a relationship with a country whose land is divided by rivers, America again, to the place to take a stand in the name of Yahweh, of the vast spiritual implements, Mount Zion, the signs posted along the way. Yeshaya 18:7. Now, if we're processing this correctly, Asher, from a relationship with, is once again pointing the way home. The long past time that Yehudim and Jews sever their allegiance with America and return to Yahweh, greeting him again on Zion. God is calling his people out of Babylon a second time to a final exodus. Many, if not most, Hebrew words, have a dark and light side. And as we know, it is the context that dictates whether the positive or the negative aspects apply. In this case, Yari, which is used here. For example, it can convey reverence or fear, respect or intimidation. America uniquely and clearly embodies both, as does Trump. And depending upon a person's point of view, and had it not been scribed in the hopeful stem, which negates free will and mandates a forceful imposition to the action of the verb, yabal, which is to be led away, it might have been seen as favorable, but it can't be in this case, not because of the hopeful stem. One of the most provocative terms in this portion of the prophecy is Sheh. It is rendered as a tribute and as a gift, which is born out of reverence and respect for the relationship. It is further defined as a present, which is in accord with the presenter's allegiance, one which is right, given in recognition, admiration, or acclaim. Sheh is from Shawa, which conveys that it is in accord, appropriate, and fair. Is this gift Yehudim? Does the return of Yisrael show the proper respect for the relationship? There is Sheh, a word which not only appears 3 times in the entirety of Yah's word, it's used twice in the Mizmor. There is also, it's paired with Yabal, particularly in Psalm 76, and the circumstances are quite similar to what we're reading here in Yeshaya 18, making it especially instructive. There we're told that after subduing a militant foe, hell-bent on destroying God's people, that those who are brought before God in judgment will Yahweh come to fear him, especially when he is angry at what they have done. The message is unequivocal. It reads, in Yahudah, God is recognized and known. His name is great in Israel. Well, that's a prophetic statement because his name's not even spoken in Israel now, and it hasn't been spoken in Israel at any time, really, since the formation of Israel, other than a brief moment under Dode. And then Israel was gone. And so this is a future event. In Yehudah, Judah, God is recognized and known, Yada. His name is great in Yisrael 76:1. In Shalem, Jerusalem's covenant of reconciliation, his protective covering and tabernacle, and his dwelling place is in Zion, the signs posted along the way. Well, he doesn't have a dwelling place now. So this is also speaking of a future time when the covenant enjoys reconciliation with Yahweh, 76:2. They're in a place of the name. That would be the home for the covenant family, the home for Yahweh's name, called the temple. There in the place of Yahweh's name, he will cripple, shatter, and break the flaming firebolts and the feistly obstinate, their defensive shields, their swords, their daggers, as well as those engaged in the battle of the soldiers fighting wars. Pause and contemplate this. Psalm 76:3. So it is at the place of Yahweh's name, the Temple Mount, that God is going to oppose those who have come to attack his people. This will occur on Towrah in 2033. He's going to shatter all of them. You are a brilliant and illustrious light. That's even interesting because Yahweh says that he's going to do it through light at this time. You are a brilliant and illustrious light, revealing and exposing from above the powerful nations, their lordly rulers, and their infamous gods who tear others asunder. Psalm 76:4, whether they be Muslims or they be Christians, or they be Marxists with men as gods, or MAGAs with men as gods, there you are. God's light is going to expose them from above, and the lordly rulers and their infamous gods will be torn asunder. Their political leaders and soaring pilots who fly will drop from the sky. Those drawn out will be captured and taken away as a spoil of war. They will be drowsy and slumbering in their stupor, such that none of these mere mortal men will have the capacity to find or secure their hands, their strength, or their power. 76:5. Your rebuke, reprimand, God, the God of Jacob, both those who drive the vehicles of war and those who provide their means of swift propulsion, will be incapacitated, stunned, stupefied, and made unconscious. This is all taking place on Towrah, the 24th of September in 2033. You, even you, are to be revered or feared, respected or seen as intimidated. So who can take or make a stand in your presence at the point in time upon which you are angry, whether you are simply displeased or totally enraged? 76:7. You are responsible for exercising judgment and the subsequent condemnation which shall be listened to and heard from the spiritual realm of the heavens, of which the land will be respected and the earth will tremor in fear. This, as in the land, will be quiet and at peace, tranquil and undisturbed, when God arises and takes his stand, and exercising good judgment regarding the means to resolve these disputes, to liberate, to save, and deliver all of the afflicted and oppressed who have engaged and responded in the land. Pause and contemplate this. So if you're going to be among those who are right with God at this time, you will have to have engaged and responded. Surely the venomous, indignant, and furious nature of humankind shall try to use you by throwing out the audacious praise, this bemoaning you in their worship. Therefore, this residue and remnant you shall bind up and restrain. And as a result, make a promise to be in the relationship restored and at peace, delivered, safe, and sound unto Yahweh, your God. May all of those around him become straightforward gifts, born out of a sense of reverence and respect unto him. This is that Yabel Sheh. May all of those around him become straightforward gifts, born out of a sense of reverence and respect unto him. Psalm 76:11. Then he shall restrain in an inaccessible, impenetrable, and isolated place the breath, mind, and spirit of the religious leaders, the government rulers and military commanders and their governors and overseers, the princes and nobility, their captains and civil authorities, as he will be feared by the rulers of the earth. 76:12. So we've been given another prophetic depiction of what's going to occur at the conclusion of the time of Israel's troubles, this time from Dode. It is interesting in that since he will be part of the process of defending and condemning, liberating and incarcerating, that Dode presents this. But I think much of even what we're reading here is going to transpire between Towrah and Kippurim. Dode's great homecoming is on Kippurim. So this is largely God preparing the world for his son's return. The political and the religious are being targeted and excoriated. They are considered venomous, and therefore they're going to be removed from the earth to keep God's people safe. And then, as punishment for the harm they have inflicted, they will be incarcerated in an inaccessible and impenetrable place. They call this the black hole of Sheol. By contrast, Dode affirms that the vital nature of Yahweh's name will be prevalent among the remaining remnant, and they will be focused. Yahweh's attention will be focused on Jerusalem. It is there that the returning Messiah is pleading with his people. As a result, make a promise to join this relationship and be restored and at peace, delivered safe and sound unto Yahweh your God, which is made possible by the sacrifice of the red heifer. May all of those around him become straightforward, as gifts born out of a sense of reverence and respect. Yabal Sheh unto him. Well, there are two entirely different ways to interpret the concluding statement. Rendering Yabal Sheh in the more benevolent way is consistent with our approach that I just shared with you in Yeshaya 18. Additionally, members of the covenant family are being presented as a gift before God. The other alternative would be to have the religious, political, and military leaders who have been removed from these feisty countries, particularly America, since it was the one found guilty of betraying Israel. They're now going to be gathered around God as prisoners. They would have been summoned to stand trial for what they have done. So Israel and humankind are going to be weakened and goyim ravaged. It's going to be a exceedingly difficult time. While either interpretation would be acceptable, I'm a glass half full sort of a guy. So considering what Yah was offering and Dode is recommending, we should always be looking for the happily ever after option. The best way to avoid bowing down before God in judgment is to stand with Yahweh now while we have the opportunity. That said, I think we all share Yahweh's prediction and predilection for accountability. We also are passionate about insights and accuracy. Accordingly, the idea of America's religious leaders potentially being offered up as a gift to Yahweh, not to save, but to openly and politically condemn, and then to be condemned and then to be incarcerated, is sobering in its implications. If this interpretation was intended, it would reveal that two aspects of Yahweh's nature have now coalesced so that we can come to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that God's righteous indignation, hating that which is harmful, is a virtue. and accountability is essential for there to be justice. So while we all instinctively appreciate that it is wholly appropriate and indeed loving to view the lives of children as precious and valuable, like it's a gift, fewer understand why it is also benevolent to vehemently oppose serious threats to those we love. Therefore, while hate is considered extremely inappropriate and politically incorrect and cultures, no matter how we render shay, righteous indignation is where these words lead. As a result, recognizing what to hate, how to hate, when and why to hate is something we should seek to emulate in our desire to please our Heavenly Father, and particularly to protect His people at this vulnerable time. The duplicitous nature of America clearly bothers God. While the nation pays lip service to Israel, the U.S. has harmed the nation with its military constantly meddling throughout the Muslim world. This has ignited a hellstorm of Islamic terrorism and created a tsunami of Muslim migration. It has also led to equipping the belligerents with hundreds of billions of dollars of American weaponry, as the U.S. plays one side against another and seeks to profit from war. Arming Israel's enemies with weapons of mass destruction is too great a crime against the chosen people for Yahweh to ignore. What Trump just did on this trip, this and Trump 2.0, and what he did on his first trip in Trump 1.0, to ally America with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and to arm them is egregious and unforgivable. God is going to treat America differently from other nations. He's going to make an example out of the United States, holding the country accountable for its Pauline Christianity, for its replacement theology, and for its military interventionism and deadly weapons that is placing in the hands of Israel's enemies and using to make Israel more vulnerable through its invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, Libya and Syria, Somalia, all come to mind, and arming Egypt and Syria now, and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, the best of American weapons. Arrogance and this notion of American exceptionalism, manifest destiny. She is now Roman and Carthaginian, with a propensity to tread upon the whole earth as if it belonged to her people. I think this is a good place for us to pause now. We've gone over an hour. We have a show that will go over an hour this evening with Family Hour. As we move back upstairs into our library studio, we will be doing a continuation of Katsir Harvest this evening, 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I thank you all so much for listening as we speak of the gateway in and out of the Holocaust. May you be among those who join us during the harvest. Good day.